can send out an email. Good evening. Welcome to the RSU 5 Board of Directors meeting. It's Wednesday, October 24th, 2018, and we are in the Pownell Elementary School cafeteria. We're waiting on a couple more folks. Jen and Valley, I believe, will both be joining us. Lindsay will not this evening. She had a work conflict. But we will get started with the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, so I would take a motion for consideration and approval of the minutes from the October 10th, 2018 meeting as presented, barring any errors or omissions. Kate, second. Sarah? All those in favor? Okay, none opposed, thank you. Adjustments to the agenda. We do have one addition to the agenda. We forgot to add in our report from the board's student rep. Rhea Fitzgerald joined us this evening. So folks who were here at our last meeting met Clay Canterbury, her counterpart. It is Fitzpatrick? Yes. Oh, so our agenda's wrong. See, I had it right in my head. I should trust my brain. So we will add in her report just after the good news and recognition from the Pownell Elementary School. And other than that, we have no other adjustments. So we'll get started with Lisa.
Welcome back to Pownell. It's nice to have you in a fully renovated space, and I think it's only fitting that tonight is the night that Dennis shares his capital improvement, because our good news starts with all of the hard work his staff put into our mold remediation starting last year, and we feel like our patience was paid off by a newly renovated office this summer. So I don't think I've ever seen Dennis happier than when he was chiseling through the wall to create my office, channeling his inner Chip Gaines. But, we feel like from a safety perspective, Jill Pettengill, my assistant, has a broader view of who's coming in the building. We have a nurse space that's much more kid-friendly. They can actually lie down, and having it right in the office has been especially helpful as we still are waiting for our new nurse to get out of her contract from her last district. So it's been very helpful for Jill and I to have access to that nurse's space. And we now have a dedicated conference room, which has really expanded our learning space for small groups and for meetings as well. So we're really enjoying our new front office. As you may know, last year was a challenging year here at PES. We had a couple of staff members that faced some pretty significant health issues along with the mold remediation, and we have over a third of our staff is new this year. So we're really enjoying the new energy. Folks have really banded together and are really working hard to support each other and support kids. We feel really great about our new hires. We've also put in place some things to support families. We just celebrated our first family math night, where we had 20 kids and their families come to just learn some more ways to have fun with math and to support math at home. And we have some other events like that planned through the year. Just coming up, we have Trunk or Treat this Friday night, which is a really fun community activity here at Pownell. We have our second and third grade musical. The turkeys go on strike next Friday, and parent-teacher conferences. And at the end of the month, we're excited because Pownell turns 50 this year, and so our parent-teacher organization, along with the Town Historical Society, is planning a birthday party for the end of the month. So we have lots of fun in our future. So that's our good news.
Thank you. Any questions for Lisa? You're good. Thank you. Okay, Rhea, report from the student rep for the board.
All right. Hi, it's great to be here. So firstly, it's playoff week. So today the boys and girls soccer teams and the field hockey team played in the MPA regional quarterfinals and the finals. Unfortunately, we just got the news that the boys and girls that the girls soccer team and the field hockey team lost, sadly. But the boys soccer team is playing right now, so we're gonna send them support. The cross country team has the state champion race this weekend at the Troy Howard Middle School in Belfast. So let's go Falcons! So it's also class fundraising season. The class of 2019 is selling poinsettias, sunrise guidebooks, and cheesecake. Sale sheets and payments are due November 21st. We're also looking for students and or parents to volunteer on voting day, selling the fundraising items. Time slots run from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And the first musical's coming up. The first music concert. The FHS Fall Instrumental Music Concert is October 30th at 6:30 in the FPAC. It will feature the FHS Concert Band, the Percussion Ensemble, the FHS Jazz Combo, and a jazz quartet. So there's no charge for admission. The FHS Theater Department is putting on their big fall musical, Big Fish, November 15th through the 18th, and you can get tickets online now. And also the Freeport Ski Swap Sale is coming up on Saturday, November 3rd from 9:30 to 12:30 in the FHS gym. This is where you can find ski gear for the upcoming winter season. Yay, winter! So donations and consignment are accepted. And drop-off for your items is on Friday, November 2nd from 4 to 8 p.m. or Saturday the 3rd from 7:30 to 9 in the morning. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Rhea. I have to say that's the most enthusiasm we've had a board report. I like it. I think we should all take a page from Rhea's report giving. Okay, so next on the agenda 7 is public comment. So if anyone wanted to get up and speak, we just ask that you come up to the mic, give us your name and where you're from, and got about 3 minutes to share if you want to share. I'm looking at the 2 people that could get up. Neither one's jumping for the mic. So, okay. All right, so we will move on to item 8, report from the superintendent.
Okay, well, I don't know, you're a hard act to follow, Rhea. And I'm hoping I'll get some of that excitement about winter coming. So Rhea did report out a little bit about our fall sports. They really have done very well in spite of these 2 losses that we had today. Our boys soccer is right now playing in the regional quarterfinals. The field hockey team did lose 1-0, but they were in their regional finals. I think that's the best they've done in I don't know how many years, so that's just a real celebration to them. The girls soccer did lose 3-2, but they were in the regional quarterfinals. These are all playoff games. Our football finished the season as the number 1 seed, and will host the semifinal game on Friday, November the 2nd. And golf ended their season with one of their best seasons ever. They finished with 8 wins, 1 loss, and 1 tie, and they qualified for the state meet for the 2nd year in a row and finished 3rd. So that's just a lot to celebrate with our athletes. The fall conference, the MSMA fall conference, began today for the superintendent. Cynthia and I attended that. This year's theme is Maine Public Education. We had a speaker, Jamie Vollmer. He's an author and someone who really is recognized as a big advocate of public education. And his whole talk focused on, building the relationship between schools and their communities, and the need to gain a lot of community understanding, trust, and support. And he gave a statistic that I was kind of interested in hearing. He said 75% of the taxpayers basically in the United States, because we're an aging country, have no children in school. And so that's one of the reasons that it's really important for us to reach out to our community and help them to understand and partner with them about the importance of education. He talked about the importance of just telling the public story, and that public schools, when you account for socioeconomic factors, outperform private schools more often than not. And he also talked about, we read a lot about the SAT scores going down, but that's because 30 years ago, the only kids taking the SATs were the ones going to college. And just a reminder that in Maine, all students are now required to take the SAT. And so when you look at the scores over the last several years, we're really going up when you control for those other factors. And so tomorrow, Candy, Maddie, and Michelle will be joining Cynthia and I, and we'll be going to various sessions, and I look forward to that. I'm very excited to have our student reps on board now and joining us. You can see that their voice adds a lot to our meetings. It's hard to believe, but we're also in the middle of the fall conferences, which Lisa talked about today, and Will had forwarded me an email from a parent there that just talked about her experience within the last week with her child's conference, and I wanted to share that with the board. She said, I won't mention her name or her child's name, but she said all of the teachers have done a wonderful job of communicating both her son's strengths and areas of need. I have always walked away feeling encouraged and excited for what he will learn next. Just last night, I was so impressed with how his teacher had him present a showcase of his work so far, and that she had him identify the goals for himself as a learner, which is so important. Thank you so much for promoting an atmosphere of respect and positivity toward learning in your school. We are so happy with the education he is receiving, the fabulous support and communication of the teachers and staff, and the emphasis on citizenship that Durham Community School provides. So I think sometimes we forget to share those kind of good news stories, so I just wanted to share that with the board tonight. A reminder that we have the learning walkthrough at Freeport Middle School for the board members coming up on November 13th or 14th. Please contact Ray if you're interested in participating in that. I have 2 staff resignations to report to you. One is Janet Wyron, an ed tech from Moore Street School, and the other one is Natasha Skelton, who's resigning just from her school nutrition position, but remains as an employee of Laugh and Learn. And lastly, I think tonight is Sarah Woodard's last meeting, and I really want to thank her for her service to RSU 5. I know that I'm going to miss your thoughtful reflection on all the issues that have come before the board, and I feel like I could always count on you to kind of see and hear the various perspectives and think thoughtfully and then give your opinion, and that is just so important. So we will miss you, but we wish you luck. And that concludes my report.
I will echo Becky's sentiments of missing your participation on the board, but I have comfort that you will be out helping other women in the state grow and get strong and be advocates in the state. So because of that, we're going to let you go. But we appreciate your time on the board for sure. So thank you, and we will certainly miss you. Okay, administrator reports. Lisa, back up you go. Yeah. Never.
I think the best way to look at the goals from last year and the goals from this year is if you could tear them apart and kind of put them side by side. I think I'll be able to kind of tell the story of sort of what happened with one goal from last year and sort of what it's led to this year. I mentioned in my good news about the staff turnover. That was something that we needed to be really mindful of as we set our goals for this year. to kind of give you a little window into that impact, of our classroom teachers, 6 of the 7 classroom teachers have only been in their position either this is their first year or last year was their first year. So we really want to be mindful to prioritize what we're doing and really think about what has the most impact and how to really support them. And that really led to sort of the reflection on where we went last year and where we're going this year. So our first goal from last year was really around comprehension. And especially around the analytical and interpretive comprehension. I spent a little part of my summer knocking on the commissioner's door because it was really you'll see not yet the results not yet available. One of the pieces of information that we've just received is the draft of the MEA results. It feels very frustrating as an educator to wait 7 months to get that information back. The preliminary look at the results look promising, but sort of the results of that part of this goal are sort of to be determined. We did see a backslide in our Fontes and Pinnell assessment from 60% to 46% of our K2 students. And we looked deeply into that and are continuing to kind of look at some of the different factors. One of the factors was our first grade teacher faced a life-threatening illness that really knocked her out of the school year for the majority of the year. And so when you have one, teachers really matter. And I think we all know that. And, Becky let us put Matt Halprin, our literacy strategist, in at at sort of the last part of the year, but we did see her continued absence really have an effect on those scores. The other thing we looked for when you look at the way that the goal is written this year is around attending to transfer. So when the Fontes and Pinnell assessment is given in kindergarten through 2nd grade, in order to have reliable scores all across the district, it's given with an assessment team. So literacy strategists and specialists and receiving classroom teachers go from school to school and administer the assessment. And one of the things that we saw that we want to attend to this year is that there was a difference between what a teacher was sort of seeing with the results in the classroom and the results that we got from the assessment team. So it might be a couple of words were worded differently when a question about genre was asked, or it might be that a student wasn't as comfortable sort of giving that information in the assessment, in the more formalized assessment venue. So we're really looking on sort of building that independence and that confidence so that kids are able to sort of demonstrate those deeper thinking skills in a standardized setting. One of the things that we look for as we go through the elementary grades is, are we seeing our students get stronger and stronger as they go forward? And I believe that's especially true with this comprehension goal. Some of the work we're doing at K2 and 3-5 is really developing sort of lifelong critical thinking skills, and so that work is sort of layered on as the years go on. So we have work to do around that. I set the end goal the same at 70% of students meeting their growth targets as I did this year. Because we're all about making sure all of our students leave as strong readers. We did have 78% of our kids meet their NWEA goal in ELA, and 72% hit the 50th percentile or above. So those scores were stronger for us around comprehension. One of the parts that we dealt with that was around academic language. We looked specifically in math at the open response, where kids have to unpack a multi-step word problem, and so we looked at helping them to do that kind of academic reading, and we saw those results go from 75% to 98%, so we were happy with that increase. The second goal that we looked at was to really unpack some of John Hattie's visible learning strategies around what works best in education. And there are 252 different items that he addresses, and we really, as a staff, came to whittling that down to what's going to have the biggest impact. What are those pieces that we want to take hold of in our classroom. And so many teachers rated themselves as still developing with that because it's still work that's ongoing. And we moved that into this year where we set a goal around increasing student agency and achievement through public demonstrations of learning. One of our big ahas was around really looking at education from the student's point of view and really helping students to sort of see themselves as goal setters, use feedback, and we really want to attend to the student work that we're demonstrating, the opportunity for fifth graders to show fourth graders what an exemplary book club looks like, really looking at more ways for them to be purposeful in the way that they share and celebrate that learning. We really want students to be proud of their strengths and to be willing to take on new challenges and grow. So that's how that sort of discovery goal morphed this year into our student goal. And the final goal really is around the fact that we're really building a whole new staff here in Pownell, and it's really around building faculty collegiality and networking opportunities. Getting our staff to feel part of their bigger district team by getting them into classrooms in Durham and Freeport, getting them to have time together as a cohort to support each other. It's very different to be the only first grade teacher and being on a team where one person's doing the field trip form, another person's running off the math home links, and another person is creating something else to support the team. So really trying to help our staff come together as a whole and feel supported so that they can take risks and really be present for students. So those are our three goals and kind of where they were last year and kind of how they came this year. Oh, the one that didn't transfer was the special ed goal. One of the things that we were seeing is that we were having a number of special ed referrals that weren't leading to students receiving services, and we really wanted to look at that part of the population, the students that weren't qualifying for special ed, but weren't meeting grade level standards, and how were we supporting them, especially around their behavioral goals and their executive function. And I'm happy to say we were able to reduce that to 6% of our population, and all the referrals ended up being solid referrals that resulted in either a 504 plan being created or an IEP, which, we want to make sure the kids that need the services get the services, but we want to make sure that we're intervening for those students for whom a classroom-based or a tier 2 intervention can really give them what they need. And so we feel like we're on the road for that. Okay. Any questions?
Sarah.
Hi there. Sounds like you've had a lot of challenges.
We have.
Oh my gosh. So good job in trying to muddle on through with all those challenges. I just had a quick question, if you would satisfy my curiosity. With the K through 2 Fontes and Pinnell results, are you able to pull out the kindergarten results from the K through 2, like from the first and second grade, to pinpoint if that's really where your scores dropped?
It was really first grade where we had the teacher with the terminal illness.
Oh, that was
were
first
really-
grade,
it was
not
first
kindergarten.
grade, yeah.
Okay, all right.
We did see in both K and 2 that the classroom data was higher than the sort of the formal assessment data, and we found part of that is around really looking at the assessment and making sure the teachers are using that when they're conferring and sort of talking, talking that language in the classroom.
Thank you, Lisa. Question about the implementation of the 3 new programs, given all the changes and the new staff in your school. How are you able to accommodate all the training for the new staff while implementing 3 new programs?
Well, part of it is the comprehension goal is a goal for the district. So that's professional development that started right with Summer Institute as soon as the teachers came on board. It's really important. Kids only get one chance at 2nd grade, so it's really important that those teachers are focusing on the priorities of really making sure students are doing what they need to make achievement. I feel like the teachers that we brought on board also bring new skills. I think my fabulous 5th grade teacher, Jen, this is her 2nd year, and already just in her 2nd year, she's become a leader in our building. So I have every confidence that the district has such a great reputation that the hires that we bring in bring their own strong skill set to the work that we do. So it's really making sure that as we go through the year, they're getting the time to unpack the units, understand sort of the standards that we've set around a viable curriculum, and can move forward. I think the work of the literacy and math strategists have been invaluable. They, as an administrative team, we've really said new teachers are your first priority, and they've really attended to working side by side with those teachers in the classroom to get that going. Another thing that you'll notice, like for example, the Orton Gillingham, that's a small subset of the teachers that are working on that part of the goal. One of the places I'm continuing to pay attention to is making sure that our students that receive specialized instruction are making a year's growth in a year's time, and that's a new program that we're excited about, the mentoring that comes from the Center of Dyslexia with that, but our new teachers won't be, necessarily part of that. So, so a number of the sort of the subsets of these goals are being taken on either by the leadership team or by, certain subgroups of teachers so that we can protect their time. But thank you for realizing that it's important that that we treat them well. And that's really where that 3rd goal came from, around really making sure that they're feeling supported and mentored well.
Oh, one more.
And this is another question. It's not just for you, Lisa, but for all the administrators. It's a question about timing. And we set our district goals in August. And I wonder if you guys have the time to reflect on those goals before you set your own goals. Because it seems like it could be a little bit of a crunch if we're trying to align the district goals to the school goals within that very shortened time frame.
I think once we have the new strategic plan, that's going to really help, because we're going to have sort of that big 3 to 5 year vision for that. Like I mentioned, what's really frustrating for me is I love to triangulate the data, and we as administrators have time in the summer to really look at, so what are you seeing and what are you seeing? And so I'm really frustrated with the state that the MEA, which I think is a really important, that's a really important assessment. It's really closely tied to what we're doing on a daily basis. To get it back at the end of October feels unconscionable to me.
Did you have any luck at the commissioner's
No,
house?
he said, it's unavoidable, but it's regretful but unavoidable was the response. So I'm hoping it will get better, and that part of it's the student information system at the state. And so, last year we did get them in the summer, so hopefully it's a 1-year issue.
You keep on him.
Yeah, it is nice to finally have 2 years in a row of the same test data. What's most important for me is to follow cohorts. We all like to really look at sort of where the cohorts are over time, and just in looking at my 3rd to 4th data with ELA and my 4th to 5th, we had like a 20% change there. So, it's also really helpful to have a test that aligns to the standard you're teaching to, and to be able to see progress over time.
I know you mentioned Matt Halpern came in at the end of last year to help that 1st grade class. I mean, do you feel like that, speaking of cohorts, Yeah, how do we make sure that any, sort of slide or issues where they didn't get to where we thought they would in first grade doesn't impact second and third and going forward?
Good. We're on it. Part of it, we put some extra RTI support in there, and along with a little bit of extra ed tech support, so that we could really help those students to get what they needed. The most important thing for me is that they don't feel our sense of urgency around that, so it's really about helping them to feel like they're making good progress over time. And, my second grade teacher is phenomenal, and she's already seeing some catch-up growth.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
All right,
Thank you.
Lisa. Dennis, capital improvement plan. Ginny told me that she gave you strict instructions, 15 minutes.
Yeah, she did. So did Becky. I think we need to put my slide up there, Kyle, if you're back there. Please. So yeah, I got to get moving because I get long-winded sometimes. So 2018-19 capital projects completed. That's the stuff that we did this year. It's really hard for me to see this, but we did buy our bus when we got it. We did the panel door locks, and Moore Street bathroom renovation. We were going to do the floors only. I'll talk to that later when we get to the slide. Middle school phone upgrade, Durham heat pump replacement 3, high school roof replacement on the 300 wing. That's the last roof that we needed to do at the high school phone system, Moore Street PA upgrade, and capital reserves. So panel door locks, that was replaced this summer. We did all the locks. We are down to 1 key in Powell now. The days of seeing the custodian with the big key ring is rapidly disappearing here. Bathrooms, got a Moore Street bathrooms. We were going to do the floor, but we took the dividers off, and they were all pretty well rusted out. So we ended up replacing all the dividers with the plastic dividers. They're really well built, and they should last for a very long time, and they're very easy to clean. And we put a coat of paint on, and they look pretty good. Middle school and high school phone upgrade. We're in the process of doing that now, along with Moore Street's thing. I'll talk about that. That's in process. We haven't finished that project yet. Durham heat pumps, 3 of them. That's in process as well. This is pump number 7, and if I could there's a pointer on here. If I could go right there, you can see that burnt wire. That's because these pumps are over-amping pretty bad, and that is part of the problem in the heat mode. There's a roof, new roof. Moore Street PA systems being done right now. It's under contract, and that's to improve the sound throughout the building, so in case of an emergency, everybody can hear you. Other projects outside of Capitol, if you look at the portable building there, we put that overhead door in the front. That's going to be used for Theatercraft storage now. The slide right next to it is the bar rail in the cafeteria. We bought new brackets for it, so now we have brackets that reach the floor, and they're more sturdy. They seem to be working very well. We built the dugouts on the softball field. They came out great. We've yet to paint them. I have the stain. I have to get permission from the boss on that because I'm not good at picking paint. And the high school teachers' parking lot was paved over the summer. It looks really nice. Moore Street's office. We had a lot of fun doing that this summer. We gave them a conference room separate from the principal's office. We gave them a new nurse's office, and we gave them a nice big main office. And then the infield for the high school baseball field was done. And that looks really nice. 2019-20, we got 2 buses on order. We got 3 more Durham heat pumps out of the 10. Well, that'll be 6 completed. Mass Landing elevator upgrade, Pownell bathroom upgrade in the main hall, Pownell septic tank. I've had a company put a camera down in there to check the leach field. The leach fields are good, but the tank needs to be changed. Convert the high school boiler 1 to natural gas, so it's dual fuel. Central office phone repair, we're getting, that phone's pretty old. There's no room for expansion, and if something goes wrong, we're probably gonna have to do that sooner. But we're careful with it. High school shades and Moore Street. Moore Street hot plates and rolling door for the kitchen. I got pictures. There's the 2 buses that we need. The 3 heat pumps. I gotta hurry. Elevator upgrade, and there's some hydraulics involved in that other than this electronics. Pownell main hall bathrooms. Those are plywood doors. It needs a good upgrade. That needs some love. We're gonna give it some love next summer. Septic tank replacement. Convert the high school to dual fuel natural gas. We have 600 gallons of oil in the ground. We'd like to stick with natural gas. It's cleaner and it's better price. Central office phone. That's Jenny's phone. She wanted me to point out that she has her safety stuff right there next to the phone. I told her I would point that out. She has her walkie-talkie and her flip chart, and anyway, high school shades for the windows. We're going to upgrade those a little bit. Some other rooms are pretty bad in the back. The rolling door needs some love at Moore Street, and the hot plates. And then moving forward, like I've told you in the past, the capital budget, the 5-year plan is pretty flexible. We add a year on, and we'll try to move things around, and we're pretty active in deciding what we're gonna do. So this may not even look the same next year, but it gives you an idea of what's coming up. We have buses, of course. We're always looking for buses. We do have a full complement of bus drivers right now. Moore Street school elevator upgrade, Durham heat pumps, that's the 3 more. That'll be 9, and we'll have 1 more after. Pownell heating controls, so we try to get a handle on the heat over here a little bit better than we do. There's thermostats, and we really don't do much electronically. Pownell flooring in room 5, it's got some asbestos. It's okay, it's in pretty good shape, but it should be dealt with at some point. Pownell windows, they are really in need of being replaced, and of course reserves. And then 21, 22, buses, maintenance truck, maybe, school elevator, high school elevator, central office, windows in the business office, a Moore Street fire alarm upgrade, Durham heat pump replacement, the last one, high school split system for the fitness area, that's AC for the weight room, it gets pretty stuffy in there. Moore Street, pave the playground, that's the little area off the side of the chips. Durham parking lot lighting to LED. We do a little bit of that at a time sometimes, so that may disappear. So we don't buy the ballast at $300, we'll buy the light kit. Pownell restroom upgrade in the gym area. Moore Street parking lot lighting, and Pownell boiler. And then 22, 23, buses, parking lot repairs in Durham, Pownell steamer? I'm having trouble reading this. High school auditorium carpet, Mass Landing steam kettle, middle school windows, rear of the building, Durham school field irrigation, that's something that would be nice. Middle school nurse's office expansion, middle school replace siding on addition. They have that hardy board siding that really didn't do well here. Middle school and Mass Landing key card entry, Pownell security upgrades, that's more alarms and things like that. Replace siding on the portable building at the high school. Is that a sign? You got some electronic, you hurry up and get out of here? 2024. This is way out there this last year. We have a roof, and that's a budget figure for Mass Landing. That's the last roof in the district that hasn't really been touched. And that's just the budget number, so don't panic. So this one hasn't even been worked out at all. And there's middle school irrigation, which Ray has done some, and it might not even be there in a year or two. Mass Landing exterior doors, I think we're gonna have to move that up the list. Pownell carpet to cover the 4th grade, and middle school, motorize the bleachers. I get all this stuff off the 20-year plan. I shared the 20-year plan with my facilities committee, John and Erica. I thank them for coming along. We had a delegate from Durham. His name was Rich George. He was a really great guy and really informative. And there's the plan as you see it. And I thank you guys for your support, and I thank the board for your support and the public. So if there's any questions?
Sarah?
Just out of curiosity, Dennis, do you intentionally try to create a budget that's 400,000?
Yes,
Is that
was
kind of mandated or something? Or I'm just not sure.
Well, that was the number that was set during the RSU formation for capital building repairs. It was 400,000. That's the goal every year. We don't always reach it, but we do. You guys are pretty supportive.
I'm pretty impressed. You seem to, year over year, you've got,
Yeah, we
comes
do
to
it.
about 400,000.
We also did, we have a maintenance ticket system, and I was just checking it the other day, from July 1st to Monday, the 22nd, we had done 364 work orders we had completed. So that's a pretty ambitious thing for our crew, and they're a good crew, and we do a lot of work in the course of a day.
How many people on your staff?
Well, I have one full-time maintenance guy, and then I have another person who does the scheduling for the field trips and things, and he does some maintenance work. And I have 2 field guys that pitch in when they're not busy doing work on the fields. And I have a van driver who does some work when he's not driving a van. So we're pretty resourceful. And then I'll pitch
Anybody
in.
who's around Dennis,
I'll
when he
grab a
needs something
hammer.
fixed, he's like, you, come with me.
Yeah, I do that. I hate to admit it, but I do that. But they're really great. We have a really strong maintenance team. Yeah.
Jeremy?
Just got a couple of items that aren't in the capital budget going forward, but we've talked over the years about some sort of look at solar electric, and I know that at least the town of Freeport has been doing some reaching out.
They are, and I attended one of those meetings, but the last meeting I didn't get to. I had an emergency this summer in Durham, similar to the emergency that we had here. We were able to deal with it that day or shortly after, but I missed one of the meetings, and I was going to get a hold of Valley because she's involved in it too. But I think there's some engineering that needs to be done before we can move forward, because flat roofs, believe it or not, and I would have thought, hey, that's a perfect spot for them, but flat roofs not necessarily a good deal. From what I understand, you have to make sure that they're structurally sound to support the panels, and the wind, it stops the wind from blowing the snow off. There's a lot of things to consider, but moving forward, we will look at it. It's just timing, I guess, time to do that.
Cool. Yep, said one more if I could. Completely different question. There's been incredible success, I think, at the Friday night and Saturday night, or mostly Friday night games at the high school. But one thing, as a parent of some littler guys, the lighting at the playground is basically non-existent, and I don't know if that's come up.
Yep. Well, Peter actually emailed me this morning about that. So he did.
We were chatting about
He did pull your message forward.
Cool.
I'll look at that. I don't know. I haven't looked at it. It's probably a matter of putting some lighting out there. You got to be a little careful in the town limits on lighting. People are light pollution and trespass, I guess they call it. But I'll look at it. I'll take a look and see what we can do there. It's a great idea when you're watching a game and your little ones. You want to be able to see them. It's great.
See the game. Cool. Thank you.
Kate?
Thanks, Dennis. I have a question, and you probably know I'm going to ask this. I didn't see in your presentation the generator for Pownell?
Oh, I'm working on that right now. We have that in the works. There's a 60,000 kW, 60 kW generator coming for this building. I haven't got it yet. There's a lot of work, a lot more work than I thought that was involved in just hooking up a generator. I had to get an electrical engineer in here to make sure that what we wanted to do was safe and that we're buying the right size generator for the future. I mean, we're not going to be able to light this whole building up at first. It would be way out of reach for us right now. But at least we'll have the right size generator to do that in the future. So that's kind of been the hold up a little bit. But you'll be seeing that pretty soon. Yeah.
Winter is coming.
Yeah, I know. I think of that every night when the wind's blowing. It's like, I wish I had that generator for Pownell. I do.
So does Lisa.
I think about that a lot, believe it or not, but I can't impose my will, as my wife tells me, on everybody and get this done.
Do we think it will be in before sort of?
Yeah, it should be.
winter break?
Should be in the next month or so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it's pretty
we're really being aggressive towards it. Yep.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you. General question. When you plan out this far, do you leave enough flexibility so there are any unforeseen things that need to be attended to? You can swap things in and out of the list that you have?
Yeah, we do that. We also have capital reserve fund, so we have that behind us. And we've used it on some boilers at the high school and things like that. We try not to, but we try to keep on top of things. But we do get surprises from time to time. But yeah, we do have options. Hopefully we won't have to go to the capital reserve fund too often, but I hate going in there and asking Michelle. She's like, what do you need that for? No, she's really nice. Huh? I'm just kidding around. I'm kidding, really. It's a great team stuff. I'm teasing. Anything else? Anybody else?
I had a question on the Durham heat pumps. I mean, clearly it's a huge investment replacing these heat pumps on a
Right.
relatively new school. So my question was, these new replacements, are they of a new,
Yes.
hopefully better generation of this technology?
So yeah, I had the same thought actually. So we've been kind of keeping an eye on Scarborough. They put the new generation pumps in, and they've had them for like 3 years now, and they have had no problems whatsoever. So we're going to be putting in the same pump system as that they have. They're sized appropriately for our school, but yeah, Dakin bought out McQuay Pumps, and they've made a lot of improvements on it. And they found out some of the, I don't want to get too technical on you, but the close bends in there and the reversing valves have been a big problem, and they've corrected all that in this new pump. So, and they have a better refrigerant that they use. It runs with a low pressure. So there's so much to it, but we're just kind of keeping an eye on the neighbors. So they're really having really good luck with those pumps. And they have 10 of them as well.
Can we expect, I mean, right now there'll only be 30% of the system, right? 3 out of the 10. Should we expect to see an improvement in the
Yes.
system just
Yep.
with the 3 each?
Yeah, you will. I mean, I babysit those pumps every day in the wintertime. I'm on there every day. I can look at them from my office. And they, if I have to go and reset them, I do that. But a lot of times there's at least 2 or 3 of them out, and the building is sufficient. And the real problem would become if we lost power for several days in really, really cold weather and we had to bring the building back up. It would be a rough ride, but those 3 pumps will help, but it would be a rough ride right now.
And I presume you're taking out the 3 worst offenders.
Yeah,
to
well,
replace
number
with those.
7, of course, with the burnt wire, that's gone, and 3 and 1, I believe, are the next 2. Yeah, we've talked about that at length too. Yeah, we don't leave any stone unturned, if
I
you will.
figured. Okay, Sarah?
Thanks.
And Dennis, is there some sort of warranty on these puppies, and or is there like a maintenance schedule that you buy into, kind of thing? How does that work?
Well, we have a preventative maintenance schedule that we use on all of our equipment, but So, yes, it's a year warranty. We've actually stretched that warranty for 5. I mean, they've done a tremendous amount of work because we complained from day one, this doesn't work, and you guys got to come back. And they had to make it right. We never really got a complete system, winter heating season, out of all 10 pumps at the same time. Never. So I've managed to do that. I think all the goodwill is pretty much gone now. They sold, McQuay sold to Dakin, and I was trying to get some help with the replacement pumps because they weren't that old. But when they sold the company, it's pretty hard to get any satisfaction in that area. So we tried.
So Dennis, how many years did we get out of the old pumps, and what's the life expectancy
got,
for the
like,
new ones?
8 years so far, I guess, 8 years on and off. And the new pumps, we should be getting 15 probably, 15 or 20. I really can't answer that completely yet because it's only been 3 or 4 years now, 3 years that Scarborough's had them. And they've had no problems at all. Maybe some minor nuisance stuff, but you can expect that sometimes. But no thousands of dollars worth of repairs.
Sarah?
What the heck, it's my last meeting.
I'm almost afraid that you're going to ask now.
You're funny. I'm going to miss you, Dennis. So I think you said that you had 3 of them going at one point, and it kept the building warm?
No, what I
So do
said
we need
was
10?
the 3 will help. I mean, I've had as low as 6 going. I think I've had as low as 5 going at one time in the wintertime, and they were cold in the kindergarten area. So I ran, that's a kind of a symbol too. You run up there and you recycle them and reset them, and off they go, and everybody's happy, at least for the time being. You really need a 10. You do. You always want redundancy in everything that you do anyway. So if you do lose 3,
All right. Thank you,
Thank you.
Dennis. We will let Ginny know you did a great job staying on time. Yeah. Michelle, the finance.
While Michelle's walking up to the mic, I received a text, and right now, Freeport at the half is ahead against Leavitt 4-0.
Woo! Good news. All right, so your purple form is the finance package. Right now, we are sitting at about 80% remaining. When I looked at last year at this time, we were about at 78.5%, so pretty close to the same area. I'm feeling very good about everything right now. As both Lisa and Dennis said, all the Pownell mold issues have been taken care of, and we did not have to go into capital reserves for those, so that was actually very fortunate. And Dennis really does stay on top of the capital improvements. So we did have to shift things around in order to make it all happen. That's why if you compared some of those slides to last year's slides, you'll see that they have moved around. But that's what we have to do in order to make sure that everything gets paid for. So everything is flowing nicely. We did start the year off, I think, better than we did last year as far as contracts going on and teachers coming on board, and Sandrine's done a very good job of doing open enrollment forms and getting everybody on board and getting them all trained and getting things ready and set. We're really looking forward to our new finance software system. We're now on the list to get Munis, so we're just looking for the date to have that happen. I'm hoping that with that Munis, these formats that I'm giving you for financials is going to be even better, and we're going to be able to accrue the salaries, which we have not been able to do before. So that's something that when we look at this and we see 80% remaining, we're like, well, why do we have that? We've got all these salaries we should pay. Munis will allow us to encumber those. So I think it's going to be a better financial software system. It's going to take away a lot of paperwork that we're running through the system. And I think we're supposed to be starting that in the next 5 to 6 weeks. So wish us luck. That changeover is going to be pretty hard. But as far as everything else goes, have been no surprises so far this year, which is wonderful to see. We just got the new bus that was just delivered on Sunday, so we're going to have that up and running and ready to go next week, because we still have to go through the whole leasing process and get it registered. And other than that, there is nothing on the table at this point in time. Any questions?
Questions for Michelle? Open positions, he said he was full for bus drivers. That's great news.
That is great news. The only open positions we have right now are the 2 that she just mentioned.
Okay.
And that's really it. We are looking always for subs. If we have sub teachers, sub bus drivers, please apply. We're always looking for subs. But otherwise, pretty full on staff.
Maddie?
Yeah, I did hear recently that there's a real problem with subs. I'm just wondering, is that a statewide issue?
It is a statewide issue. It's not sub-busing has been an issue for probably 3 or 4 years now. It's gotten significantly worse, but even subs for teachers we've seen it on the rise. But it is a statewide issue. Mm-hmm. Yes.
So Michelle, can you tell us a little bit about the fees that now the district is going to pay for the subs when they actually get their fingerprints done and all that?
So what we've discussed, we just had it in our recent A-team meeting. What we're thinking of doing is something that we apparently did maybe 4 or 5 years ago, which is doing some sub-training, whether it's for bus drivers. The adult ed program used to give a course on getting your permit, and then once you got your permit and did your you have to do so many hours on the road, and then you can get your license. And then once they worked with us for a certain period of time, and we made the determination of maybe 5 days, that then we would reimburse them for their fingerprinting. So we're going to do that for both bus drivers and substitute teachers. But we have to get the training and process first, because we want it to be, we're going to train you to do what you need to do, and then you give us 5 days back, and we'll reimburse you for your fingerprinting. So,
We're paying them for those 5 days, though, right?
of course.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
You said give us 5 days back. I just wanted to make sure. Yeah. It's a great deal.
Yes. They will be paid.
Okay.
Is that it?
Thank you, Michelle.
You're welcome.
Okay, board comments and committee reports, board information exchange and agenda requests. So this is, as you may recall, this is a new item we added to our board agenda to give folks an opportunity to share information. If you're on a subcommittee that's not specifically mentioned below, finance, policy, or strategic communications, and you've had a meeting and want to share, this would be the time to do that. If you had a request for information, all of those would be fitting uses of this time. Don't all jump at once. Okay. Finance Committee. Kate.
The Finance Committee last met before our last meeting on October 17th, and that was just a quick meeting with Michelle, myself, and Dr. Foley, going over the letters that we then had presented to us in the workshop from the 3 towns regarding the funding formula. And also at that meeting, that's where we chose the order of which the towns were to present. That's all we did there. Not much. Next meeting is November 14th at the central office. We'll be continuing our work on the funding formula. And are there any other committee topics we'll be covering at that meeting?
I feel like we bounced something from the last meeting, so.
We did. So we're actually going to be adding 2 things. One is we want to figure out we have 3 policies that we chose that we wanted to talk about and change. So I just want to get some clarification on that. So we're going to discuss that. The cost sharing formula. And I don't know, did you get a hold of Peter Joseph? No, okay. Okay. Okay, so we'll be discussing solar panels with the town, and he's either going to be able to come in this next meeting or the following meeting.
Okay. Strategic communications. Candy. I don't know where
Okay.
anybody is still.
This is the yellow sheet in your packet, and pretty much what's on here. We reviewed several things, the budget brochure, and decided that that had been very good, and we'd leave it alone, that everything was very positive. The marketing brochure, again, thought that it was good the way it was, and decided where we wanted to leave it in all the schools, town libraries, town halls, and have it out at board meetings. We decided that we were going to do the satisfaction survey every 3 years. The student exit survey, we were given the data that we're taking away to look at it in our next meeting. We'll be coming back to kind of take a look at that data. That we would review the exit data twice yearly, June and November. And I think the only other thing, just to mention, at our upcoming meeting, as I said, we'll look over the exit survey. And the other thing, we kind of asked Becky if we could put together a list of all of the communication that we're currently doing on a regular basis with stakeholders. So, and we'll bring that list to you all, so you see what the communication is.
Great. Kate.
Is the student exit survey when students are relocating out of district? Is that survey? Okay.
Not necessarily relocating physically, but just not going to our schools.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Because we don't, I mean, if somebody moves, we don't ask them, right?
No, we do.
Oh, we do?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So anybody exiting. Okay,
Leaving the school, yeah, our system.
got it.
And just the satisfaction survey, who gets that again? Is that a teacher, parent? Parent? Okay, every 3 years. What have we been doing that in the past?
Once, last year. It was a new survey.
That was the only time? Okay, thank you.
It was the inaugural survey. What's that?
That was 2 years ago now.
No, I think Unity and Pride was 2 years ago. Satisfaction was last year. Yeah. So the timing on that satisfaction survey being 3 years, I know there was some discussion about the staff survey and trying to alternate the years so that we weren't double surveying in this, over surveying. And I think the thought on that was to be on the alternating year. But if this is 3 years, then there will be, the way the math works, they would fall in the same year every now and then. So I don't know the rationale behind the 3 years, if it was just that we felt like that was enough time to get potential change or whatever, but I just throw that out there.
Yeah, I would prefer to have it every 2 years also, just so that we don't overlap, and also so that we don't wait too long to get a good sense of what's going on in the community before we send another survey out. I think 2 years will be appropriate.
Maddie.
I can understand not wanting to do it too often because you don't want to fatigue the audience, but if it's something that's relatively simple, I think every other year is a good plan. I just think it depends on the design of the survey. It should be quick and easy to fill out with room for comments.
I'm trying to remember how many questions were on that one, and I can't. Quite a few. So maybe it's something that, maybe it could be scaled back a little to be more conducive to more frequently. So. Okay. Policy. Carry on, Candy.
In your green sheet, you'll see that there were a couple policies that we reviewed where we weren't recommending any changes. However, the ILD, educational research, student submission to surveys, analyses of survey of evaluation, excuse me, we do have a comment that we wanted to bring up. Maddie had something she wanted to say.
So, yeah, we had a discussion about that. You should understand that policy pertains to any external surveys, so not us surveying the student population, but other parties who want to survey the student population. And we felt that policy was fine and didn't need revision, but it did raise the question, did we want to consider adding a policy about surveys that happen within schools? For example, at the high school, in an academic setting, there might be a survey created for the purposes of learning how to conduct surveys, or maybe just finding out, whatever, educational purposes. And we decided that we're actually really comfortable with the practice as it is now. There were some changes that Jen implemented at the high school last year. We feel comfortable with that and didn't feel we necessarily needed a policy for that.
Okay. Okay, do we have people that are currently surveying our kids from externally? We do?
Becky?
I think about the yes, the Midas.
The health survey?
Right, health, and asking about like drug use and alcohol use, and, yeah.
And who are these people? Midas?
Could you go to the mic?
And there's notification, it's optional, and so there's notification sent out to parents, and it's conducted, I believe, every other year. Ray, do you know if it's every? Okay, it's in January. And then they use the data and aggregate the data and then share it out with us. And we've used it, actually, we talked about using it in the dropout prevention and, what are the trends. And like, for example, one of the results might say something like, it's reported that students are reporting in middle school that they have had a drink once every 30 days or something like that. There's just generalized questions about use of tobacco, alcohol, whatever. So it's totally anonymous, but it's just to give us a sense of what's going on in our communities and what are we doing to, what can we do to help that.
Kate.
Wanted to add to what Maddie said, that the policy itself is designed around, first of all, the notification practices, so you need to get permission from parents, and they need to be notified that you're going to be surveying their child by an outside organization. So what we were talking about was for the types of surveys that Maddie was talking about for student purposes, educational purposes, it's not an external organization. Should there be a policy about notification procedures so that parents are aware that their child is being asked to answer survey questions? And what we felt was that while there wasn't a practice in place maybe at the beginning of last year, the issue was raised that parents should know about some of these things as they come out, or the questions should be more fully vetted before they get sent to the student body. So in response to that, the principal at the high school has implemented a practice. It's not in policy, but she has a practice in place of vetting the questions, and we felt, after speaking with Cynthia about what her practices are at the high school, that we wouldn't recommend having a policy related to those types of surveys. But we wanted to make sure that the board was aware of that and the difference between what we do have currently in policy versus this separate issue that's addressed just through procedures.
Yeah, that seems like it might be unwieldy from the notification and permission standpoint. I mean, to your point, Maddie, like if they're doing a survey on what they like in the cafeteria and do they want to request changes, I mean, that, something like that, as opposed to the health survey. So the external ones do require parental notification and
Yes.
consent?
Yes, and they can
Yes.
review the survey as well.
Yes.
They have the right to request a review of the survey as well. And all of that, they usually will send a generic letter that the schools can modify and put their school name in that, and they get mailed out or sent out in the communication, might be through email. And that's sent out to everybody, every parent.
Sarah?
And to your point, is it a consent thing or is it just an opt-out thing?
Sometimes, okay, this one's an opt-out.
I'm not wild about
Yeah.
that.
So just to give you the survey that I was talking about, it's Maine Integrated Youth Health Survey, just for your information. The acronym's MIAS, but.
Right, so if you don't say, I don't want my kids to take it, they get it when they go to school.
And what if it lands in a spam, a junk email box or something, and the parent never sees it? Email and an opt-out system is a really bad way of trying to police that.
I wanted to clarify that there is parent notification, but not consent. At least I get all those notifications. I've never consented to anything, and no one has ever asked me to consent to anything.
Right, so it's all opt-out,
opt-out.
right? So you know about it, and if you don't want them to do it, you let the school know.
Right, but I don't want to send out the message to the community that we do ask for consent. We
Right,
don't.
so it's implied consent if you don't say otherwise.
Correct.
Right.
And I would say if somebody was doing research, for example, for a PhD or a master's, those types of things require written consent.
Right, yeah. Also, when you send that out to the parents, are you sharing the method of how that survey is being taken? Is it written? Is it in a digital? Like, how is the information then taken from the student if it's written? Can the teachers see this? I'm just curious what that process looks like. And is that shared with the parents?
So I'm going to ask Will or Ray to respond to that. Like, for example, the Maya survey, I think she wants to know, is it shared in the letter?
Yeah.
What format the students are taking the survey in?
Yeah, what does that look like? What is the process of getting that information from the students? Are they filling out a written form? Is it done on a computer?
Would you go to the mic? Thank you.
And we're just speaking to this particular survey.
Yeah, I could probably start looking to see if I can find a copy of the letter, and if not, we can certainly get you a copy of it. But historically, it's been a multiple choice questionnaire, and we conduct it with 7th and 8th grade. And it's been done for a number of years throughout Maine. This is not a new piece. And then it is anonymous, so there's no identification of the student on the form. And when we get information that Cynthia was alluding to, what we get is, it would say, your school, the state. So we have no information about any individual upon it.
So are the students taking them on a paper form that are
Yeah.
filling out in the classroom?
Historically, that's what it's been, a paper
So-
document, which was multiple choice. I'm not sure if it's now.
Is there a third party that's coming into the room and taking those results? Are they going to a teacher?
No, they get sent to the Pan Atlantic Survey Company.
From a teacher?
So the point is like, does my teacher see my kid's paper
No,
when he
they
hands it
put it
in and
into an
says, yes, I do drugs
No.
every day?
No, historically what would happen is students would put it into the envelope.
Trying to be extreme.
So it goes into an envelope,
Yep.
it's sealed, the teacher doesn't read
Yeah,
it, nobody
no.
sees it other than,
No.
thank you.
Then Pan Atlantic.
That was your question, right? Like,
That's my question.
can other people see the answers?
You know what, I'll tell you, over the time that I've been working with middle school, so whatever, 20 years or so, what's been interesting about that, because there's a lot in that survey that doesn't necessarily pertain to 7th and 8th grade, but what has been a shocking change over that time period is that the concern really at that time was about tobacco use, and then after tobacco, sort of like alcohol or drug use. But now the biggest concern, that was, the first place we look is around sort of self-harming or suicidal concerns, because it's replaced substance use as a concern for children. So it is an important, I know we're not debating is this survey important or not, but just to throw out there, that has been an important source of information for us to be able to sort of really focus in on the efforts we provide through sort of counseling and stuff like that to make sure it's being met.
And that information would be asked on a survey as well? On that particular one?
Yep, on that, I'm speaking specifically to the Maine Youth Health Survey.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
It's a lot of discussion for a policy we're not changing. Carry on.
Just to finish up for the committee report, you'll see that on your green sheet, there are 4 policies that we discussed and we're bringing to you when we do the policy review. And their participation at Board of Directors meetings, student computer and internet use, internet safety, student computer and internet use and internet safety rules, and school system website web pages. And then there are 3 on the bottom that we looked at, and our recommendation, we discussed them, and they're will be rescinded because they're procedures and not policy, and they will be on the website. And that's pretty much it.
Okay. So should we transition into policy? Okay. So the first one is the one that we discussed at the last board meeting, and we feel like we've captured in the edits that are provided for you, the changes that you requested. And then I guess maybe is there any comment on that particular one? Yes, Vali?
So I thought we had talked about, instead of naming the publications that we use to notify the public, rather than say Times Record and the Sun Journal for publication, we would say for local publications or local newspapers or something more generic.
I didn't have that captured. I remember that part of the discussion, but those are the ones that she sends them to, and I know we talked about, they decide whether they publish them, so whatever the board wants, we can make that adjustment.
Yeah, and I'm just pointing it out because if we want to preserve this policy as is for the long term and any of these newspapers.
For other publications, you mean? Yeah.
Add another one or drop one. We don't have to change the policy.
Is that what the board would like? Okay.
Yeah, I think it just makes it a little bit more flexible.
So it's sent to publications?
Local
Publications. Okay. Thank you. And the next 2 go together. I have Jim Grant here tonight. If there are any technical questions about the policy, but the edits that you will see on the student computer technology, actually, we deleted computer and changed it to technology because it's not just about computers, it's all technology that we have, and technology we may not even know of that we may have coming down the pike. So we're changing it right in the title. And internet use and internet safety, and then the accompanying safety rules that go with that. So the edits are strictly to make them updated. There's no content really change in any of those policies. So I guess I would ask that you ask questions about either one of those 2, if you have any, and if not, I can move to the website. Jeremy? Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Oh, hey. I'm good. All right. Just had a question on the student technology and internet use. On page 3 of 4 on that one.
So that's the safety rules part, the R-R, right? So 3 of 4, okay. Yep. What letter?
Under letter G for system security.
Yes.
I think maybe it meant to say, right in the middle of the paragraph, it says any user who attempts to breach system security. But then it says the word breach again in the next, or cause a breach of system security. I think maybe that was supposed to say bypass in there. So that was my thought there. That
I think it was just the people who try and the people who succeed. You're both in trouble.
Right. Yep. So if that wasn't the intent, I would recommend putting the word bypass in there too.
Okay. Okay. Bob.
There are a few computers that were missed that need to be switched.
Okay,
to
could you point them out?
Last paragraph before the internet safety. It says privacy in their use of school computers.
So are you on the first policy?
Yeah.
The one without the R?
First policy, page 1.
Okay.
So, right, the sentence right above it,
Violations?
internet's- yeah, it says, no expectation of privacy in their use of school computers. And it probably should say in the use of school devices. And then at the bottom.
I'm sorry, I couldn't follow you. Could you tell me
So
which
it's
paragraph?
the top section before internet safety, it's the last paragraph that starts RSU 5, number 5,
Mhm.
RSU number 5, if you go down to the last sentence in that paragraph.
Thank you.
And then the very last sentence on that same page.
Mhm.
It ends in operations of the school unit's computer system, and you probably want to say technology system.
Okay.
Find and replace.
Right.
And I had a question about acceptable use, the last sentence where it says that the expectations to comply with all specific instructions from school administrators, school staff, or volunteers. Who would be the volunteers giving students directions? Could you give me an example of who may be a volunteer there?
I'm looking to Jim.
Right here.
Like who might be authorized? Okay, so any approved volunteers is what he's saying that might be in the school, an approved volunteer.
So maybe like Odyssey of the Mind coach, because they use their computers for
Mhm.
doing stuff with that. Maybe, I don't know. They're volunteers. Any other questions on those two together before she moves on to website?
Okay, so the next one is IJNDC, school system website, web pages. Again, they're just edits that clean it up a bit. Website, we decided that it can be written either way, but most of the places that we have it throughout our district to have it as one word, so those are all now together as a compound word rather than two separate words. And then we just made some edits. Instead of school department, we put RSU 5 website, and then we changed the the superintendent may delegate responsibilities at the end to the director of technology because that's his formal title. And then in the bottom, we have the cross references. We did cross out the computer there to coincide with the policy before it. Any questions on that one? Okay.
So we vote on these separately, yeah?
Yeah, first reads.
Okay. So I would take a motion to accept these as a first read for the policies, as noted. Erica and Kate, all those in favor? None opposed. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so now we have the two policies that were brought to you before, and I don't really need to talk more about them because there were no changes made to them other than to report out that one of the public comments at the last meeting was about the training, and we already had, she didn't know that, but I shared it with her that we do have 5 staff members that will be receiving the training, 2 next week, and then in Augusta, and then there'll be 3 others going in on November 13th to Portland because their schedules, one session was better than the other. So we do have people being trained in the train the trainer, and then they will come back and do the training in-house here.
Okay. Any questions, comments on those two? I'd take a motion to accept the second read of those policies. Valerie and Kate, all those in favor? None opposed? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and the next 3, They just come to the board once for rescinding, and I'm just going to take you to another policy for the reason the first two, GB, GAA, E1, and E2 are, well, we want to rescind them because they're separate forms, but also if you go to that, the minutes that were shared, the last policy, that's GBGAA, is bloodborne pathogens. We are not making any changes to that, but in that policy, there's a reference to the occupational exposure control plan that we have. And so we do have an exposure control plan, but when we talked with the nurses, there really wasn't a good awareness of that. And then when I pulled together some other exposure plans in other districts, they include these two that we're actually rescinding. So those will be embedded in the work that we're going to be doing in the control exposure plan. Some of the stuff in these are actually outdated and they're not exactly what we do now. So, so I don't want you to think they're going away. They will be addressed, and that's going to be worked on with the nurses. And if you want to see that at some future time, I could bring that to you. So that's why those two are, the first one's a form, so we're moving all forms anyway over. We'll keep that form over on the web, we'll keep it on the website over on the right, so it's not going to go away and disappear. But we will probably be making changes to that, and that will be included in our exposure plan. And then the last one that we're asking to rescind is just a form that the students sign. And it's going to stay as is, but it will be on the website, where the policies are off to the right, where the forms and procedures are versus a policy. None of these are required policies.
Okay, any questions on those three? I'd take a motion to rescind those three policies as presented. Erica, Maddie, all those in favor? None opposed. Thank you. Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you.
Okay, so policy review, we've done through all those. 11 is complete, so 12 is unfinished business. Workshop on elementary proficiency-based education.
Okay, so we have an awesome team made up of K-8 administrators and Cynthia that's going to bring you our practices at the K-8 level.
We're just waiting to be queued up on the screen. Good time for a bathroom break.
And I also should mention Jen is here, the 5th grade teacher from Pownell, to also help with the presentation. Sorry about that.
I'd get started, but they're all gone. Yeah. So this moves it forward. Yeah. Okay, so I'll just move it back. And then this button, if you have in the middle the arrow, if you hold down on that, it has like a cursor, you have to kind of find it. And if you put it right in the center of the arrow and press it, it'll start. Okay, so you try it, and I'll run up and help you. Okay. Are we ready? Or should we wait till? The? Okay. Good evening. Tonight we are here to share the teaching and the learning practices at the pre-K-8 level. So the goal of this presentation this evening is to share our philosophy with the board and the community about proficiency-based instructional practices and the student learning in pre-K through grade 8. So we feel that these will best be illustrated by showing you what the best practices look like in our schools. These are the practices that we are currently focused on for improving student achievement in RSU 5. We believe these practices will result in better learning for kids. Tonight's presentation will take you through these practices from the lens of the student. These practices should look familiar to you as they were adopted at the last board meeting and are part of our board goals. You will see examples of these practices in action throughout the presentation. We believe that when implemented well and consistently, it will lead to student growth. And as Lisa had mentioned in her presentation, all students will make a year's growth in a year's time, no matter where they start. We will begin with Emily, the principal of Mass Landing School, who will talk about the first practice, clearly defined learning goals standards.
So the very heart of a proficiency-based system is having clearly defined goals. And this is what it might look like. This is a progression that would be used in a 3rd or 4th or 5th grade classroom. You'll see that there are several levels defined for kids, and this is around work defining theme in their narrative reading. And in a minute, I'll show you a couple ways that this would be used in the classroom, but you can see a couple things. A, kind of what the expectation at each grade level is defined, and B, it's clear how the work builds on it year after year. So this is used in a variety of ways in the classroom. The first is when students start a unit, they begin with these progressions in hand. So these are students in a 5th grade writing classroom, and they have just done some narrative writing, and then the first thing that they're going to do the next day when they come in is they're going to look at those progressions, and they're actually having conversations and annotating the progressions to identify what's different about that standard at the end of 5th grade. Or for some of them who might be a year behind, they might be looking at what's different about it at the end of 4th grade, or what's different about it at the end of 6th grade. And so they're getting really clear right from the beginning of the unit about where they're headed in their learning, and then they're doing some goal setting work. So in one class, students not only looked at the progression, but then they got out the writing from the previous class and they gave it another shot based on the work they had just done with the progression. So here's a student who revised her ending, and then she set a goal around what she was looking to do in creating a sense of closure in her writing based on the progression itself. So creating that clarity for kids about where we're headed. The second thing is it is highly valuable to teachers as they think about what to teach kids. So some of our workshop model is whole group instruction, but the majority is small group instruction. So here, Jonah Chase, a 3rd grade teacher, is working with 2 new 3rd graders. And you can see on her notebook, it's a little bit hard, but there's a picture to the right. She has the progression for kids there as they do work around character traits. So one of the big lifts for kids, and that level 3 is an end of 3rd grade target, is really beginning to name a character trait and to have evidence to support that trait. So what she's doing is dialing down into the skill of how do we study a character's actions and notice patterns across those actions and use that to begin naming character traits and providing evidence for that work. So by having these progressions, a teacher is able to really target where a student is. So these kids really are grade level students. They're working towards that grade 3 standard. But you can imagine she's doing this very same thing with students who are above and below grade level as well, because those learning goals are defined across the continuum. It also helps her set goals for students and provide feedback, and I know Julie will speak to that a little bit more in just a moment. Then students throughout the unit use these progressions themselves. So here's a 4th grader who was editing some writing, and he was talking to me about how he was trying to work on his transition. So you'll see to his left, he has a checklist, which again is grounded in those learning goals, and he's looking through what things has he not done yet, and transitions were one of those. He said, oh, there are a lot of gaps in my transitions. I went, like, I did this. And then the next paragraph is, then this, instead of thinking about how to create more fluid transitions, and that's what he's working on. So here's a student using those learning goals to improve his own writing. And then throughout the unit, it also helps students with goal setting. So you saw a little bit of that in the first slide, but it also gives a context for teachers and kids to have really specific conversations about where they want their learning to go. So students use these individually, but they also use them in groups. So the video you're about to see is 5th grade students. They're in a book club, so they're reading a shared text. They're talking about that text. And what they're doing is they're using that progression in front of them on the blue paper to reflect on if their conversation is really pushing their learning. So you'll see the student has an insight, and the objective was for them to come up with a group goal, which you'll see on the right. So Cynthia, I'm gonna... No. Oh, there we go. Yeah. Thoughts, Jim? Oh, Trevor's gone. All right, we don't necessarily need to get
starting 4th grade because we are suggesting themes and we're thinking of good debate ideas, but like we don't really engage ourselves that much, and we don't have a lot of backup evidence to support our themes.
So you can see from these examples that these learning goals are at the core of what kids are doing. And really, to me, I can't imagine students doing what they're doing and teachers doing what they're doing without these learning goals defined and without them being utilized throughout kids' learning over the course of days and weeks. Oh, so that is a learning. All right. Next up, Ray Grogan is going to talk about success criteria and rubrics aligned to standards.
So one of the things that we've worked very hard at, K-8, is aligning all of our curriculum to the national standards in each subject area. And then once we have our curriculum aligned to the national standards, then we really worked on developing our assessments to be based on the national standards. And then once we have those assessments, really working very hard on making sure there's a clear pathway to a 4 on all of those assessments. Each of the assessments that the kids are getting should either have a clear scoring criteria, a clear scoring rubric, or a clear product descriptor, or some will have a combination of those, but all of the assessments should have at least one of those 3. Some will have 2 out of 3 with that. I was told this is like my old Wii.
In LA class, we were tasked with writing a comparison and contrast essay, and Ms. Murphy wanted us to write one because she thinks that it is a good skill to have, and we're going to need to be able to use the skills that we use to write the essay later on. And we were given this product description as sort of like a guidelines, like what you need to have for the essay that we're writing. So the rubric also, like, this shows you, like, if you're trying to get a 3, you can follow these things, like you need to have all these things to get a 3, have all those things in your essay. But then for a 4, you need to have all these things in your essay to get a 4. So this helps you because you can sort of see, like, which one you're aiming for.
Yeah, with the rubrics too, it helps to know what you did right and what you did wrong when the teacher is grading you. And then also it isn't a hit and miss for the first essay when you don't really know what the teacher wants, because it says so right on the paper.
And then after it's helpful, after you're done writing your essay, or usually we're given a rubric like this for any project. After you're done or think you're done, you can check over and see if you have everything listed here. For instance, if I wanted the 3, I would make sure that I had everything on these, like my paper compares and contrasts items clearly, but if I wanted a 4, then I could say that here it calls for more detail, so I could add that. And then on the front, it sort of explains why we're doing the project, and sometimes it'll be like a little bit about the project and what is expected of us, and then this is just like saying the exact what it is for each specific grade.
I'm good at the week.
Another task that we've worked on at the elementary level is to make sure that on each of the math assessments, there's a clear pathway to a 4 for each standard. So Amy Wheeler, our elementary math strategist, brought together elementary teachers from across the district and really looked at what items could be added to make sure for each standard there was a clear pathway to a 4. And the math committee this year will be collecting feedback to make sure that those targets clearly are identifying those distinguished mathematicians. This is a sample from a 3rd grade cover sheet that parents get at the end of each unit assessment, so that parents are able to see too how their child is progressing over time. Okay, now Julie, if I can do this correctly, Julie is going to speak to providing specific feedback for students.
So as you see each of these practices, you'll see there's overlap. All of these practices are embedded in each other, and so the feedback that we're giving to students in order to move to the next level, we're looking, I have to press the button. We look at these 3 questions. What does success look like? Where are you relative to success? And what are the next steps to move you closer towards success? So the progressions is where all of this work is anchored. This is an example of an emergent storytelling rubric that we're using in kindergarten. This isn't used directly with students. This is teachers are using this to assess. And then confer with students in individual conferences to help them move through the stages. And interestingly enough, this is where that character work that Emily was talking about really starts, so that we're having our emergent readers starting to think about what characters are saying and how they might be feeling. So that is the foundation of the work that they're then doing in 3rd grade that Emily was talking about really thinking about character traits. So this is how it moves through the grades. And there's a video of a teacher conferring with a student using a rubric and giving them specific and clear feedback to move to the next level. What have I got to do? Go ahead.
Hi, Carson. Hi. So, Carson, we are working on retelling our stories that we know, right? And today for our mini lesson, we talked about how partners can help give each other feedback. But I was thinking, because it's nice and quiet in here, that I can listen to you do some storytelling and I can give you feedback so you're ready for partner time and you can be the teacher. You ready? Okay. So I'm going to have you start retelling Harry the Dirty Dog and speak in your loud and proud voice. Go ahead. Oh. There you go.
One day, Harry the Dirty Dog heard the bath thing, the bath flowing, the water flowing.
Yeah.
And he took the scrub and buried it. And then he went far away a hole.
Huh. Can I stop you for a second? You're doing such a nice job remembering the things that we've heard in this story, and I see you looking at the pictures. You're doing a great job. Can I give you some feedback, though? Okay. Because one thing I noticed is right here, you're saying what you see and what you notice. But I'm thinking, Carson, that you're ready to do this. You're ready to think about what Harry might be thinking or saying and adding that to what you're saying to make the story even better. So let's try it again. This time, I want you to say all the great things that you said about Harry hearing the water running and deciding to run away, but I want you to add what Harry might be thinking or saying. Go ahead, start with one day.
One day, Harry didn't down here, the water running.
So, oh, I need to. Okay, how do I get to my next slide? There we go. Okay. Oh. So this is a zoom in on that original progression that you saw. And if you look at the arrows, that feedback the teacher was giving to that student was really moving them from the labeling and commenting and taking them into the using dialogue in sequence, and a little bit of the elaboration. She kind of touched on a little bit of that too. We don't use those first progressions with students directly like they do in the upper grades. They're not there yet. So this is what it would look like for teachers to be sharing with students as a teaching tool. And so the arrow just indicates the feedback she was giving this particular child to move up that progression. So that was clear for him to see. And then this continues through the grades with increased sophistication, as you saw with the middle school and the upper elementary students. So not only are teachers giving students feedback, but we're teaching them right from kindergarten to give each other feedback too. And so these progressions come in handy when we're doing that work. I have an example of kindergartners who are giving each other feedback already. Oh, no, I don't. We didn't practice this part.
Is this the one you want me here?
Yes, thank you.
So Fred, what is your goal as a reader?
To talk like the characters.
Adelaide, what's your job as his partner?
To give him feedback. The little red hen. Once upon a time there was a cat, a dog, a mouse, and a little red hen. Well, the cat's favorite place to sleep was on the warm couch. And the dog's favorite place to sleep was on the warm sunny porch. And the mouse's favorite place to sleep was by the warm fire. While the little red hen washed the dishes and mended. Don't forget what the little red hen is saying. Who will help me to do all these chores?
Okay, I'm gonna pause you. Fred, how did that feedback help you?
It helped me to read more.
So as you heard in that conversation between those students and myself, also embedded in this is individual goal setting. So the feedback given by the teacher and other peers then translates to what's my goal for next steps. So in kindergarten, our students are just starting to articulate kind of what are they working on when they're working by themselves. And then as the students move up through our grades, they're writing and setting those so that they're kind of longer term goals across units and their work as readers and other subjects. Lisa is going to take us into talking about the separation of content from habits at work.
It's supposed to be a video on that page. As you know, our habits of work, respect, preparedness, determination, and engagement are separated from our academic achievement. Now, this is a long-standing practice at the elementary level. By separating out the academics from the habits of work, we're able to, it was there. All right. Well, it's a video of Jen, so luckily Jen is here. So she is here to share just a little glimpse into her 5th grade classroom around how she teaches into the habits of work with her 5th graders.
So in 5th grade, we spend quite a bit of time unpacking the habits of work. The 4 that we look at in elementary school are respect, engagement, determination, and preparedness. Students have various opportunities to talk about how they demonstrate these habits across the school day and the ways that each habit helps them to be successful learners. Recently, in my class, we unpacked the habit of preparedness by defining it and sharing examples using the Pownell School Habit of Work rubric, which we adapted from the DCS rubric. The video shows an introduction to the lesson that I taught, where we talked about what preparedness meant, and then the kids got into groups and they described how you can show preparedness in reading, in writing, in math, science and social studies, and in their specials. Then the kids shared different ways, like for example, in reading, kids shared that to be prepared for reading, they would have a Just Right book, they'd have their reader's notebook, jots prepared for their conversation, and so forth. And then they generated this chart that shows their thoughts in each of those areas. We also use a rubric where they reflect on themselves individually and rate where they fall on a scale of 1 to 4, and they set goals in areas that they want to improve. So these are kind of hard to see, but these 2 rubrics show one student marked themselves as a 3 because he felt that every time he came in the morning, he had his homework folder, put his homework in the box, and read the morning message. So he knew that that was the expectation, and he knew that that was a way that he showed preparedness. Another student rated that she was in between a 2 and a 3, and that she needs to work on bringing her homework and her folder and being ready with her materials. So she's reflecting on where she currently is and setting a goal for something that she can do to improve. One of the reasons why we reflect is so that as students are building their understanding of each of these habits, I can coach in and help them to reach their goals. And this is ongoing work that we do throughout the year. We spend time looking at different habits really deeply. Right now in my class, we're having a preparedness challenge, and every day we're working really hard to make sure that all of us are bringing our folder, putting in our homework, and doing our lunch count. And we're getting there, but it's an ongoing process. So I think that Ray's going to talk about. No.
So, and then what you'll see on a kindergarten through 5th grade report card is that the habits of work are reported out holistically as how the students are doing over time. And that's because most students at the elementary level have a single classroom teacher. You may see in the specials other, you'll see the habits of work listed by the specials as well. And Ray's going to talk about how that looks at the middle school.
This is a copy of the 6-8 report card. And you can look at, each of the red lines is a different class for the student. And then like within that bottom left-hand corner, that's the social studies class. You can see the gray line, which is the social studies habits of work grade. And then below that, you see the next gray line, which is the social studies content grade. Underneath that, that student has been graded for preparedness and determination. And the one thing that you can see that's a little different this year than last year is all of the grades this year are rounding to the nearest 10th place, as opposed to the half point last year. This is another change that we made over the summer, is the quick lookup page, which is the first page that parents and students go to within PowerSchool, now looks different. So this is a list of all of their classes. And then underneath each class, you see their habits of work grade and their content grade, clearly separated. Before, you had to click in to see that, and it wasn't quite as clear and easy. So this was an attempt to make it clearer and easier to understand for all. And just one number that I did want to put in there is when we did survey the students last year and talk to them at both middle schools, 73% of the students did want, preferred to have the habits of work and content grades separated and not have one overall course grade.
Opportunities for reassessment, which given this clicker seems like we will all benefit from. It's actually this was a prop to show that. Yeah, you say that, but I'm still going to ask you to do it. All right, so why reassessment? We recognize that students need varying amounts of time for success, and we certainly don't want instructional holes in critical content. I think you've heard from some of the other presenters prior to this how the curriculum builds upon itself year by year, grade by grade. We want a culture where students are striving to be as successful as they can, and that relearning plans require additional feedback and work on the student's part in order to be successful with that. I think perhaps, other than the clicker, the most obvious example of reassessment is earning a driving license. Approximately 40% of people do not pass the driving test or earn their license at the first attempt. And if you think that that was a one shot only, it would have dramatic impact. The criteria is clear on what you need to do to pass that. People can practice, get more coaching, they get feedback on why they're not passing it, and then they can reassess as many times as they need to in order to demonstrate the proficiency required to get that licensure. This is just an example that I'm going to share from seventh grade science class, where they were at the beginning of this year learning about their first opportunity for reassessment following an assessment they'd taken. Can I do it? Oh.
Which was your lab report, which was our assessment for the end of the scientific method unit. I'm going to hand your rubric back to you. Before I hand this rubric back to you, I want to talk about what happens if you are not happy with your grade because you know or you feel like you could have done better. You have an opportunity to do a retake. When you retake a lab report, you do not redo the entire thing. You look at the pieces of the lab report where you did not earn a 3. I'll give you your report back to you, and we'll follow up immediately with what that might look like. So that way you can take a look at your grade and see, oh, do I even need to do a retake? So coming back to you is your rubric. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to just digest that front rubric. Ladies and gents, I want to bring us to Zach's question that he had for me because it pertains to all of us. If you revise your document, you do not need to print it out and hand a printed out copy to me because I can go into your electronic Google Doc and see the edits, but you do have to hand the rubric back into me. Okay, one more side note to this. If you see my comments and you're like, ooh, Ms. Gridley, I still don't really get why I'm not at a 3, then you meet with me. How do you make an appointment to meet with me? Email for office hours, absolutely. Because that way, everybody has the opportunity to get up to a 3 or higher. It's just right now, the responsibility is going to get passed to you, and if you want to make those revisions to improve your grade in science class, it's now on your shoulders to take those steps. All of you flip into your lab report, which I love, because it means that you're moving on from, oh, did my teacher give me any comments on my actual work? The answer is yes, but it is not found on your paper copy. It is found in your Google Doc. Quick check-in with your partner. Why would I give you feedback directly on your Google Doc, not on your written paper? Chat with your partner. And you see exactly where the change is needed. So right now, I want you to go into your Google Doc and take a look at the comments that I've given you. Okay. We're going to talk about that right now. Great question. I'm going to give you more time to look at this. For now, screen halfway closed. Eyes back on me.
So, Kat, I see that you did your reassessment for your science lab, and did you manage to change your grade?
Yes.
And what did you change it up from?
I had a 2.5 and I changed it to a 3.
And so, how did you know what you needed to do to fix that up?
Well, on a Google Doc, Miss Gridley had put like a comment and it told me exactly what I needed to do and how to get my grade up.
All right, great. And so, did she give you the answer, or did you still have to do a lot more work to figure out how to fix it up?
I had to figure out the answer. She just gave me like what I had to fix, like the one that I had to.
That area?
Yes.
So, what was the area for lab report that you had to work on there?
I had to fix my constants.
And so by doing this process, do you feel like you have a better understanding of that now?
Yes.
All right, great. And I see that your determination grade changed there too. So is that as part of the reassessment?
I think so.
So would you say that when you do your reassessments, does that help you feel like you have a better understanding of science? Or did you find that a helpful process?
Yes, I felt it helpful because not only did I like learn more on what I got wrong, so I could fix it. It just helped me like figure out what I messed up on.
Great, thank you so much. That's a little hard to see, but that science example, I think, sort of captures the different parts of what we're trying to describe as these different practices from proficiency-based practices. So there's clearly defined learning goals relative to the science standards. The success criteria was provided, rubrics aligned to these standards, specific feedback provided to students to move to the next level. There's a separation of content from habits of work. There's a recognition that different students will need varying amounts of time for success and opportunities for reassessment. So one of the primary questions that has been asked in a variety of ways in the presentations we've done over the last year has been, what's the research on this? And we interpret this question to mean, are these practices effective? Are they working for RSU 5 students? And understandably, on a more personal level, each parent really wants to know, is this working for my child? As you know, we are constantly asking these questions for ourselves, and as such, the best research is our own. And we're looking at how are these efforts stacking up in comparison to other schools in Maine. Oops. So I'll read some of that. I apologize, it's quite small up on the screen there. But these are the 8th grade science MEA scores from Durham. It emphasizes the impact of classes where strongest practices exist. So as I mentioned before, where there's clear learning criteria, specific feedback, you can see that over the last several years that the students achieving, or percentage students meeting or exceeding the standards in science, thank you, it's perfect. The percentage students meeting or exceeding the standards there have steadily climbed, and over the last few years have been in the high 80s and 95% of the students achieving at that level. At the state level, it's been pretty steady, around 70%. So as the time goes on, that separation from the students achieving compared to the state. Oh. These are MEA scores at 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. Our grade levels with the longest habit or longest experience of working with these practices is really in the K through 5 levels. There's no state assessments at the K2 level, but looking at 3, 4, and 5, you can see from the data we received for the previous year, we don't quite yet have the public data for this year. You can see that 3rd grade there, the state scores are in the yellow column, the RSU 5 scores are in the red column, and the difference between the state score and the RSU 5 columns in the green. So in 3rd grade, in language arts, RSU 5 is 69% of the students meeting or exceeding, and at the state level, 49%, so a difference of 20. If you look at that green column, you'll just see that the students in RSU 5 do very well in comparison to other students in the state. We shared this slide last time we were here at PES in the spring. This slide shows the impact over time of student scores compared to other middle schools in Maine from FMS, and then also nationally from the NWEA. You'll note the increase in the FMS student achievement as the staff have been implementing and refining these teaching and learning practices. That over the last few years on the MEA, the growth relative, or the achievement relative to the state has increased, and the number of students meeting their growth targets on the NWEA has also increased. So these are the practices that are experienced daily by our pre-K through 8 students in RSU 5. Professional learning, coaching, professional development time is systematically planned around these practices. We benefit greatly from working with each of the schools as the teachers, when they're doing this work together, compare their practices, and we're often learning from each other from the different schools as people find more effective practices and get more experience. The teaching and learning is focused upon student growth by meeting students where they are at, helping all students reach the minimum level of proficient. But we want to emphasize that proficiency is the floor, not the ceiling with this work, and we take that very seriously. And hopefully this snapshot of teaching and learning has been helpful to give you a better sense of what's going on at the K-8 level. Oops, I think I've got to push this again. All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you all. That was a great presentation with a lot of detail, and I think it's always helpful to see things in action as opposed to just trying to make our best guess on what it means in our minds. So thank you for those. Questions? Maddie?
This is just a little question. Jen, in your example of the students assessing themselves, it took me such a long time to realize it went 4, 3, 2, 1 instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, and I think that's different than it is at other, is it not? Is it 4, 3, 2, 1 in every rubric?
I had the same thing. I was like, it's such a silly thing, but consistency, like, I'm going for the right, because that's a 4 in my mind.
I was just wondering, I thought there must be some reason, some brain science reason for it, but no. Okay.
I wonder if kids ever, like, make, are they consistent by school? Maybe? No? I feel like every rubric I've seen from my kids, the 4 has been on the right side.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, maybe we could do that.
Other questions? Valley?
So while we're on consistency, I had a question about how rubrics, how consistent they are from grade to grade and from classroom to classroom, and whether they're consistently shared with the students. I know that at the pre-K through 5, they may not be, but at the middle school level, I think the students are very capable of getting those rubrics, understanding them, and using them. And in my experience, my children don't always get them at the middle school level, and some teachers hand them out and some don't. So I wanted to find out if we have district-wide approach to how we treat how rubrics for the middle school levels. And I also wanted to find out if there's any consistency about the criteria for retakes, because I totally understand and support the notion that students need to have the opportunity to reassess, but I'm not quite sure whether all teachers in all classrooms apply the same criteria for retakes.
So this is going to be an interesting answer because I'm not quite sure what Ray's going to do, and I've tried this, but it doesn't seem to work on him. I would say to you that I don't think we are quite at that level of consistency across all classrooms or across both schools at the middle school level. I think where we are consistent is that we communicate specifically what habits of work are being taught or assessed or practiced within specific units or at specific times within work. So we tend not to approach it like, okay, all 4 habits are being assessed constantly. or that all 4 habits might be particularly focused upon on this piece of work, but it might be if they are doing an assessment in Spanish where they have been working to memorize and practice communicating and talking, then it might be more of an emphasis upon preparedness and engagement. And the teacher in that context would be saying, this is what preparedness would look like, this is what it sounds like, reinforcing it through the work. Hey, did you hear that piece there? That's a great example of preparedness, how we had talked about that. Or this is what engagement will look like, this is what engagement will sound like, and giving examples of that. So I think what we're consistent at is teaching into these as we're getting stronger with it, but we don't necessarily have this universal piece across room by room on one rubric, because it tends to vary a little bit by what the content is. We do have a consistent rubric for the middle school that says this is what we're assessing, but how it gets applied is where the variety comes in. Does that make sense?
It does, and I have a follow-up question. So when you say that there is a rubric that each school has that is shared among the 2 schools and all 6 through 8 grades, how much flexibility do teachers have to alter that or add things to that rubric on an individual basis? And the reason, I'll give you an example. In one class, a teacher may say, well, to get a 4, you need to bring certain thing. In another classroom, the path to a 4 may be doing something different. And sometimes it's confusing to the kids that, oh, I need to remember my water bottle for such and such a class, because that's the path to a 4. But in another class, it may be something different.
Yeah, I don't think we'd give a 4 for bringing a water bottle. To be, I mean, or at that discrete level. It's not like one thing. I think the emphasis upon this work is habit. And so, we've worked hard this fall. We've done a lot of work still with eligibility, as an example, around preparedness. And I think that sort of shows where habit comes into action, is that historically, a student athlete who may be struggling for eligibility might take 7 papers home that night and do them all and come back and be eligible. This isn't about, okay, for preparedness, if you've not been prepared for several weeks, it's not like, okay, tomorrow you come with a pencil case and now you're prepared. They have to demonstrate it, and there's latitude that as they are demonstrating it and earning that back up, they're not restricted, but it really is around creating habits. So it wouldn't necessarily be one person. So I think for us, I think we score it consistently. The rubric is, this is the rubric. This is what a 4, a 3, a 2, or a 1 is, but how it gets interpreted within the class, it varies because of the type of learning that takes place.
But there are conversations going on with the teachers then to emphasize the notion that the habits of work are precisely for that, to create a good habit of studying.
Yes.
But they're not these ancillary things that don't contribute to habits of work that are added on individual basis by individual teachers.
I'm not quite sure I understand, but I would say to you that within each room there's probably some variety, but more linked to the nature of the curriculum and the learning than to the actually how it's being scored. But I don't doubt there's some variation. I would say to you that our teaching team across 6th, 7th, and 8th grade do talk about what habits of work looks like in their class. They are comparing practices and looking at developing this sort of consistent approach so that children understand, if I'm building this habit of preparedness, it's not like, oh, I really never have to be prepared in science to do well, but I have to be super prepared in Spanish. It should be a consistent norm that feels like this is what a prepared student sort of does. This is that scoring criteria. That's the sort of what success looks like that you're hearing about, and that's what they're getting feedback relative to. It just may be in the different context of the class.
And you have PLD time or PLC time devoted to calibrating the teachers?
Across all the different work. It's across all the different work. I think one of the emphasis I'd put upon this presentation is that I think for each of us, we have tried to convey this is what it looks like. But it doesn't look like that constantly in every single pocket right now. This is what we're, we have some great examples, some wonderful teachers doing great things. And we also have people who are not quite on that continuum, and that that's where that professional time comes in. That's what that professional work is. I mean, you heard Lisa talking about a number of new staff. As a district, what we have found is that coming into RSU 5, it's a big on-ramp for new teachers, even experienced teachers. I don't mean someone straight out of college. The level that the teachers are working at and expected to work at around our curriculum models is a very high and demanding level. So when we phase things in, an example in literacy, we might say, okay, we're going to start with these 2 units, and then we're going to add this unit and add this unit. The students now are used to having, multiple units in reading and writing every year, and therefore new teachers have to ramp straight up. And so there's a lot of comparative work. There's a lot of looking at how are you scoring this piece of writing, how are you scoring this piece of writing. The use of progressions is the consistency that comes in that you heard about. So teachers will sit together and compare. I'm stuck on this one from my class. What do you see that between this level and this level? And so constantly striving for that consistency. And I would say to you that across Habits of Work, we do a similar thing. It's the same sort of conversations. It's a little, is it messy? Yes. Is it the finished article right now? No. But is it on the pathway to getting there? And is there recognition of the importance of that? Yes, I would say so.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure the emphasis was on calibrating both on content and habits of work, because I wasn't sure it was happening at the same level, and I had seen more discrepancies on the habits of work lately than on content, so on habits of work.
Yeah. Okay.
Other questions? I had a question. The quick lookup in PowerSchool, is that on the mobile app too, or is it just on the website?
Mobile app. Currently from PowerSchool, the mobile app cannot be modified.
Okay. It's too bad.
Yes, I agree.
One of the questions I had when we were watching specific to the peer-to-peer feedback, I mean, I think that was a cute example because they were kindergartners, but it does raise the question of how do you make sure that it's appropriate feedback? And, kids aren't always the nicest when they're sharing their reading and their writing. I'm curious how we make sure that that is beneficial to everybody.
Jen, would you take that one, just because I think that would be great coming from the teacher perspective?
Okay, thanks. One of the things that we do is we're constantly modeling good examples and voicing over. So when kids get into partnerships, sometimes a teacher might say, a compliment might start with, you could try this, giving them like sentence starters to start their conversation off, and constantly rotating around and listening in. We work really hard with partnerships too. We know our kids really well. We know who's oil and vinegar, and we know who's going to be a good pairing. So all of those thoughts go into getting kids together to give feedback to each other.
Okay. Other questions? Valerie? You want to go first, Jeremy?
Just had a kind of a detailed question on the second to last page with the MEA math scores. It just looked like on that chart that a lot of the numbers look good, but there definitely was a downward trend on the math for that. And I don't know if there was discussions around that, those boxes there. Oh, maybe that's why, just between cohort.
It's different cohorts.
That's why it really is important, I think, to look at the difference, because on any given year, you could see like a downward trend like that just based on the test. Right. And so that's why we're always looking at how far are we from the state average. But you can see that we're pretty consistent.
Yep, gotcha. And how much data do we have to do some trends on this too, though, for?
So we will be doing some update in the next couple of months now that we have the data, and we'll bring that in, so we'll have now 3 years.
Did you just say 2? Did I hear someone say 2? No, 3 years. Because the year before that, we had the Smarter Balance test, right? That we didn't have MEAs. So in our last proficiency workshop, if folks in the crowd had a question, we offered since we have all of the administrators here, if you guys had a question for them around the pre-K to 8. But you do have to go to the mic. Okay.
I'll ask more questions. So I never got an answer to the criteria for earning a reassessment. So is that calibrated across classrooms, grades? How are kids told what they need to do? Does anyone who wants a reassessment can have one? Is there any requirement that they need to have shown preparedness, determination, any of those other habits of work in advance of earning that privilege to reassess?
Whenever there's a grade that the child doesn't like, the teachers will, the students have been told that they can do a reassessment, but they do need to do a relearning plan with the teachers, and that will vary, depending on the subject, the content, and what their first, marks were on the first assessment. With that, if a student has, a 1 or 1.5, the teacher's probably really going to be tracking them down to do that. If a kid has a 3.5, the kid, really would need to come back and see the teacher on their own. That's not something the teacher has time to be tracking down everyone for a reassessment. But there are reassessments, and our rule is that you much like the high school, you need to, within the first couple of days of the assessment, you need to go back and talk to the teacher, and then you have within 2 weeks or until the unit's over, whichever's later, to kind of redo that within that, because we're not getting a lab out from September at the end of November because they want to bring up a grade. It has to be around when the learning took place, and then they have to complete the aspects of the learning plan.
So one of the issues that was brought up by teachers at the high school was that students were showing up on assessment date without having done the work that was required to do well at the test, because they were already banking on having a reassessment, and that wasn't creating really good habits of work, and we want to emphasize good habits of work too. So at the high school, as you all know, they basically tweaked the criteria so that there is some effort, minimum amount of effort that needs to be shown before students can reassess. Is there something that at the middle school level you guys are focused on so that students do their best work
I would think
the first time around?
Well, the relearning plan that kids has to do is a heck of a lot more than a minimum effort to do that. So I would say that our criteria of getting to that, for most teachers, that relearning plan, there's a decent amount of work that, revolves coming back during BCS, coming back after school. It's not just showing up and, seeing the test the first time and then showing up and taking the second time once you've seen it. There's definitely some significant work between there. And I wouldn't say that's feedback that I've heard from our teachers, that they feel that kids are not coming prepared. They're feeling more like that the opposite is that the kids know the relearning plan is a lot of work.
Okay.
Which it is, because we want them to know the content before they get assessed again.
Thank you.
I have a question on reassessment. Is the reassessed, well, I guess you're just fixing your grade, but on the one part that you got wrong, but do you average that with the first score, or?
So when you hit that bus on your driving test that first time, and it was so embarrassing and awkward, and you go back and you nail it the second time, and the instructor says, boy, you drove so well, but unfortunately you hit that bus 2 weeks ago, therefore you still don't have your driving license. It wouldn't really make sense, would it? What we're looking for is children who understand the material. It's not a sorting system. It's about making sure children are proficient and have the skills they need. So when if a student goes back in and fixes it up and they can demonstrate their understanding and their proficiency in that, that's what they are scored at, because that's what it's telling us. So we don't average it or look for some kind of consequence, if you like, for that score.
I guess I'm just thinking, to Valley's point, that if you had, it would deter, I guess, kids who could do the work if they just applied them. They could do it the first time. It would discourage that if there was that kind of like, yes, we want to make sure you know the content, but it will be averaged with your first score.
Yeah, we're really not looking for deterrence, but what I would say to you is it's really not an issue. It's not an issue that we're experiencing. So, you know, the students do their best. Some understand more than others. Some have better habits than others. Some have different situations than others. And when they come in, the message that reassessment sends is this is important learning, and it's important that you have it. And we're going to stick with you until you have it. And it's not about, and you should have had it already, and because you didn't have it already, there's a consequence. It's really not the culture we're looking for. And I think that it starts really in earlier grades where it isn't really about reassessment. But if children are doing open responses in math, you know, they'll work on it. And they'll do their best at it. And then on day 2, they'll look at examples of different solutions to the work they've just done. And then they can go in, and they tend to use a different colored pen, and they'll fix that work up, and they'll compare it to the scoring criteria themselves. And they're looking at, I didn't think of that, or I hadn't thought of doing it that way. That makes more sense, and I'm going to now do that work and sort of show how it is. It doesn't actually change the grade for them, because it's really about, the emphasis in the earlier grades is really about learning. But what they're learning there is that there's other ways of doing it that might be better, that help me understand it better, and therefore that learning sticks, and I can apply it, which is ultimately the goal.
And I think the average could actually be a deterrent in a negative way, that, so say you get a 2 on something, you need to nail it to get a 3. Like, you need a 4 to average that out to even get a passing grade or a proficient grade of 3. Like, I could envision a child or 2 in my house who would be like, that's not going to happen. I'm not even going to bother with all that extra work then, because I'm not going to get a 4 on it. Yeah.
Weight it so that the reassess.
I think you may be projecting maybe situations that maybe older students might pursue upon an age range where it really doesn't exist. So are there children who, would like to get, to be able to do things that are easier? I'm sure everybody might want to do that. But it really isn't about, I'm not quite sure the benefit. If the benefit of that is to say, work harder the first time, that's really what habits of work are about, right? And as Ray said, there's the ramifications of having to fix it up. It's, and working to fix it up. So it's not really been an issue.
I'd be interested in I'm not going to be here, but I'll watch it on video. I'd be interested in hearing what Jen or Charlie have to say about why these same kids who are doing well in the middle school age are then having this. It's obviously not all kids, but I'd like to hear them talk about if it's a problem, what that looks like, and what they think is happening, and how to stem that if they're doing so well in middle school.
And I would just say, just so you know, that we don't have. There's not issues of people wanting to fix things up from a 3 to a 4. The small area where it's a bigger concern is children who may have a 2, fixing it up to a 3. And I'd say that we had the same problem with children who had a 70, looking to improve that understanding. So it's really, there's always an aspect in school around aspirations. And that there will always be a percentage of students who, for whatever experiences or for whatever reasons, their aspirations may not be as bold or as high-reaching as we would hope. And that is the group who, more often than not, we're looking to reassess. It's not people who are like looking to improve an average or in that regard.
I really appreciate you making that point, and also your earlier point about culture. We live in such an assessment-heavy society that I think that is often a deterrent to people with different learning styles. They'd rather opt out of the system. And I was fascinated to read recently that Singapore is doing away with all grading completely, because their understanding is that it's a far richer educational environment without assessment, but instead encouraging creative learning and deeper thinking. So I know it's a bit visionary for where we are right now, but I see us planting the roots of that culture in our early learners here, and I think it's really valuable.
And I agree with the benefit of that. I'm just thinking if there's a high percentage of students who could do the work ahead of the first assessment and would do well in the first assessment and are not doing so by choice, that creates a whole amount of work for these teachers who then need to put in learning plans, reassessments, all kinds of things are ramifications of, if you have a high percentage of students who do that. And I heard that it was happening very frequently at the high school to the point where they changed the criteria for reassessment. So I wanted to find out if it was happening here, why it was happening there, why not here, where does the transition happen, and what do you do to maintain that positive culture of learning while at the same time making sure that kids are motivated to produce their best work for the first assessment, if they can. I mean, their best work may not meet the level that they need to be at, but you don't want to encourage students who can meet that standard on the first assessment to opt out of doing the hard work the first time around.
Fortunately,
and creating work for the teachers in doing so.
Fortunately, it's not something that we're experiencing. So I'm sure if it was, we'd look at something.
Jeremy.
Just one more. What methods are being used to gauge the teachers' perspective of this, and how can we get some feedback to us on how the teachers feel about these practices and how it's going?
Well, we certainly surveyed teachers last year as part of this presentation here, and I think what you saw there from our science teacher is representative of the work that's taking place. And I know that, I feel like I end up just taking over the microphone. Would anybody else like to answer that? Oh, it looks like Ray's going to have it. So I'm happy to speak to it, obviously, but.
I think it's a great question. I think, like last year when we presented here, we did have, some teachers speak. We did have the teachers surveyed and present that data. I know when we, even a couple of years ago, when, a number of years ago when we switched, completely from the 1 to 100 to the 1 to 4, with that, that was asked for by the teachers. They came to the PBE committee and said, we do not want to live in both worlds of the 1 to 4 and the 1 to 100. Please put us in the 1 to 4 only. That was, the teacher voice coming to the district PBE committee, who, is the one that kind of helped make that change for the middle school. I think that the teachers have had, great influence on helping create the rubrics, especially around the habits of work. And the other is, I think that, creating the assessments is something they have aligned to. So I think, based on kind of the surveys we've had, I do feel good about the teacher buy-in at the K-8 level on it. And I think, when we have that teacher buy-in and that, effort and energy toward that is kind of why the test scores move the way they are, because, people are on the same page.
So I just want to make a comment about the assessment data that you guys presented. We hear from the community repeatedly that the evidence to support that gains in our system are directly attributable to PBE practices. So I'm wondering if we shouldn't just be a little more careful about showing data and saying this is because we are implementing PBE, because as we have heard from Ray just now, there are other things that have probably contributed also, like aligning what the teachers teach to standards and having better PLC time, having better PLD. So there are many factors that go into increasing achievement, and I just don't want the community to hear from all of us here that we are just patting ourselves on the back saying PBE is the best thing we could have ever done, because this is the response and these are the results that are directly attributed to PBE. So even though I totally support all the practices, I don't want to just be blind to the fact that there's so many other factors that we should highlight too, and PBE is just one of them.
I think that's true. I think we have spent a lot of time on the curriculum. Whether it's the math curriculum, whether it's, Teachers College. I mean, our teachers work really hard in a lot of different facets of what they do. This is one, the pathway that that they're delivering the content. But I think there's a lot of things that they're doing really well in our schools, and I couldn't say we could point to one of them as the reason why scores go up. I mean, there's so many different factors. You could never do a control that, that really showed why specifically something changed. But, if we can look at systemically, these are the things we've implemented over this time and these are the trends we're seeing, there's likely some pickup from all of those things. So, okay. Any other? Oh, Kate.
Sorry about this. I'm going back to the reassessment and the habits of work. So the whole idea of being able to reassess and how that plays into preparedness. I mean, we're separating it out, the how grade and grading on preparedness. I just feel like when you do an assessment, there is an element in the grade you get that reflects your preparedness. That just in how you score on the assessment, it includes whether or not you prepared. Does the teacher know when they're grading on preparedness whether the student studied? They don't know unless they go and assess and see how they do. I mean, it's that kind of where I'm getting at. I'm totally in favor of the how grades and having reassessment. There's just so many, I guess, different facets of how you can look at this. There's many different types of students, and I'm just, the best way that I can think of this is like my own son and how he would do this. And he, if he doesn't study, it's not going to necessarily reflect in his preparedness grade, because yes, he arrives at class ready to go with all of his materials. And where are we capturing that element when we're grading and assessing the students? The idea of when you go home and you prepare for a test, how are we capturing that in how we grade the kids?
You got it, Maddie?
Well, no, I don't know if I do. I don't know if this might be part of the answer or not. I'm wondering if the how grades are only in formative assessments, and if the grade grades are in summative assessments only. And I wonder if that might be how they're separated. I don't know.
To some degree, yes. So like if I take a math class and there's 5 sections before you get to the end of the chapter test, the homework along the way is going to be graded on the habits work. Did you come to class prepared with your homework done? So that would be kind of their preparedness along the way. Because what we find is most of the time when the kid comes with their homework done and prepared and ready for class, they're going to score pretty well on the exam with that. So, that's where that preparedness would look at, are they coming to class ready for the day? It might be that, for some days it might be you just need to bring your laptop and what you need. Other days it might be you need to bring your homework. Other days it might mean you need to know these concepts coming into class, because if you don't, you won't be ready for this lab, with that. But like the night before the test, you've done all your homework, you've done sections 1 through 5 homework, you've done all of that. Teacher says to study for your test. The teacher's not going to give them a habits of work grade on that chapter 2 test because they don't know if they studied 5 minutes or 1 hour. They are going to give them a content grade, and if the content grade isn't what it's supposed to be, then they would do a relearning plan around that. If that makes sense.
That's absolutely what I was getting at, is that there's, I guess, the argument for being able to average the reassessment with the first assessment is that there is an element in there of a habit, of being prepared. And I just feel like we're missing that part there, that when our kids go on to college, they might not be prepared for that. This idea of like, you need to study the material before you.
What we're really trying to work on is making sure they don't have the gaps when they get to the high school and college, because I think, Michelle kind of hit it right on the head with, if you have a kid that gets a 2 and they know to get it up to a 3, they have to get a 4, but in 4, math might not be a possibility for them in math. And they'll say, so I have to do this whole relearning plan to go up a half a point. Sorry, I'll keep my 2. I really think it could have, where we're not seeing it as an issue, I think doing something like that is going to create an issue. I would see that more. Will?
Yeah, I just think that there's an assumption perhaps being made. I mean, the student who I had spoken with was purely just because I knew she had done a reassessment. And I can assure you that student works really hard all the time. So this assumption that she got a 2.5 because she hadn't prepared in some way is inaccurate. The whole issue here is around understanding. So I bring it back to, I know it's sort of cliche to bring it back to that whole driving test analogy, but the assumption that someone didn't pass because they hadn't prepared, and you think about how many people, most people prepare because they want to be successful. And there may be exceptions, and I'm not quite sure. Obviously, the high school, there's a different situation going on, and developmentally, in the midst of adolescence, there are different aspirations that are taking over. But it's not an issue that we're experiencing at the middle level. And as Ray said, for those children for whom they don't have great study habits, so they're not working, we're working on that too, and that does show up. But at the end of the day, the point of making sure someone understands it, we don't want to take away any motivation for them to actually learn the material and be successful. We want them to be motivated to be successful. And so I know I've said it several times, but we don't see there as a need to score someone down when we're actually scoring them relative to a criteria. Either they met the criteria or they didn't. So it's not like you met the criteria, but you're going to have some consequence. So I'm not quite sure how else to say it. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if we were experiencing at the high school, we'll look at it there, but it's not something we're seeing.
I guess I'm feeling like we're kind of talking past each other, because I totally get what you're saying, but there is always going to be this element of kids that aren't applying themselves because of the way the system is designed, that they can achieve more but aren't, because we're allowing some ability for them to kind of sit back. And I'm thinking of like the high achievers, and I'm thinking of the ones that don't ever study and they miss something on the test, and then they are allowed to reassess, which I think is great, because I want them to learn and know the material. I want my son to understand what mass is versus weight, and I want him to reassess on that. But he also didn't study at all for the test. So if he had applied himself a little bit more, then he probably would have gotten that concept the first time and not caused all the extra work on the back end for the teacher and himself.
I mean, I think the point of having to have a relearning plan and reach out to the teacher, which for middle schoolers I don't think is always an easy concept. I think maybe they do that once or twice, and then they realize the consequence for them is, gosh, this is more work than just studying for the test. I'm just going to study for the test. So maybe that's the learning in the reassessment for those kids that maybe could have gotten it on the first time, and they're like, all right, next time I'm just going to spend an hour studying, and then I don't have to do all this other stuff in the back end to get the same grade. So, I mean, I think there's learning potential on both sides, but that's just my thought.
I think the reassessment is looking different for different kids in different classes as well, because there wasn't a whole lot that he had to do to reassess for that one question. He just had to go back and fix his work. That was it.
Yeah,
I think another thing to think about is he's coming home to a home where he has, you know, a lot of support, and I think it doesn't take away sort of the parenting responsibility around what your expectations are for what he brings to the first time, because you as a parent do know sort of what the effort was that was put in, you know, on the first time. And I think your expectations for your child, for everyone, is, you know, really important. But I think one of the parts of the population that this reassessment really helps are those kids who are, you know, giving it their all, but they may not be getting the same level of support at home. And so, you know, I think, you know, by having this plan, it doesn't take away a parent's right or responsibility to have high expectations for their children, but, you know, we want to make sure students are as, you know, strong, competently as they can be with the understanding. And so, especially right from early on, the stronger a foundation we can give, the more resilient kids can be. And I think also that's why that, for me, the determination habit is one where, you know, we've always had students that haven't really had to try and have flown through things, you know. So we're really trying to pay attention to like putting challenge in place for kids so that they have to face adversity and they have to sort of lift the level. We had a little typically four person in Jen's room where he was like, oh, well, what if I'm okay with a 2? And she was like, no, you're not okay with a 2. You know, like, I think that it's not lost in the personal exchange that can happen. So I think, you know, if a teacher sees that, they can address it. And I think, you know, it's important for families to feel like they can address it if they're seeing their child do that. And I would say talk to the teacher to let them know that that's an issue so you can work together.
Can I?
Yeah.
Speak?
Okay.
May I speak?
Do you have a question? Do you have a different comment? Are we good? Do you have if you have something you want to share, go for it. We're just trying to.
I guess my final comment would be that I think that what Lisa just said is a great example of why the communication with the parents is so important, because we all do have a very intimate understanding of this because we sit on this board, but not all parents have that same understanding. So you may have the same expectations as a parent as I do, but without understanding how all of this works, and that we do, you know, we want to raise up all kids, and just because we want to raise up all kids doesn't mean that is a detriment to your kid, because now everybody's succeeding. So.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So to that point, I wanted to ask, are we going to talk about this that was in our packets? The learning guide, or proficiency-based learning guide? Because I do have some comments about this document that's currently on the website.
Sure, or is it like...
Well, it's probably the part about where it says it's still required by the state.
Yes,
Yes.
that is one.
Yes,
That was
yes.
the first
We
one.
need to do a revision to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I would definitely look
Yes.
at that one, remove it.
Quickly.
And then, in general, the document, even though I really like the way it's put together, it leaves me with a little bit of the sense that Kate has right now, that we're just aiming to be proficient. All that you just said was that we know, we try to differentiate, we try to make sure that the kids achieve their highest potential, be that proficient or distinguished, or even lower than proficient, and then we really push for proficiency. But what I'm learning in this guide is that we're satisfied with proficiency. And I know that that's not what we want. I know that's not what you're trying to do. So I do have some suggestions. I'm not going to give them now because it's not the right place or the right time to do so. But it's something to reflect on, that we want to make sure that the document that's on the website that the parents read accurately reflects how far we want to push our kids to achieve.
So, excuse me, is the right venue for that the PBE committee? Is that the owner of said report or guide?
Yes, that would be appropriate, or you could just pass it on to me and we can take it to the PBE.
Right, that's what I was thinking. Right. Okay. Any other comments, questions? Okay. So can I ask now, do we know the final score of the game? Wow.
That's wrong. It's 5-0. That's either way, we.
Well, congratulations, boys. Okay, so new business, none. Personnel, none. Public comment. So we'll open it up to you guys one more time. If you had anything you wanted to share, then I would take a motion to adjourn. I'm just staring at Sarah because, you know, as her last meeting, we'll let her motion to adjourn. Second from Erica. All those in favor? Thank you. And thank you all. That was a great presentation. Thank you.